Hey everyone, it's Mike Andes. I'm the founder of Augusta Lawn Care, where we have over 170 locations around the world. Today, we're actually talking to a plumbing company, and over the past 4 years, Victor, the owner, has grown the business from zero to almost $1 million in annual revenue last year.
The second half of the year we doubled actually.
However, as he's beginning to do that, he's having a lot of difficulties getting skilled laborers trained up and being able to do the jobs by themselves without him having to constantly go to job sites.
So I cannot just expect them to figure it out.
So today we're going to be talking about how does he create systems in the business to make sure he either has to hire a head of operations, needs to do better training, or create systems in place so that he doesn't have to do as much quality control. Working in the field is probably the lowest leverage thing you can do in the business. We're going to be talking about efficiency scores, KPIs, and figuring out what ratio of admin and salespeople you should be having to the amount of field technicians that you have out doing the labor. Let's go ahead and jump into it with Victor from Spotless Plumbers.
So we are based in Denver, Colorado. We mostly do remodels and new build. We do a little bit of service as well. I've been in business for a little bit over 4 years. I have 5 employees, plus an office staff and myself. And last year we closed like $950,000 total revenue. Our books are still like we're closing it, but around like 10-12% net profit. Um, and yeah, that's probably the most important stuff, I guess.
Okay,
Um,
awesome. And so when you started 4 years ago, did you start solo or did you buy the business?
Solo, I started from scratch.
Okay, awesome, good stuff. Well, what can I help you with?
So let me pull up my questions. So obviously, this past 4 years, it's kind of like a roller coaster. Because a year ago I had my first hire was 2 years ago, and last year at around the same time I had two technicians only and myself. So the second half of the year we doubled actually, and with growing it, I realized that okay, we gotta like start like systemizing stuff, but uh, yeah, like every business owner get distracted all the time, so I don't really know. For example, like KPIs wise, like what I should track, what I should, especially with that, as I said, we're like 90% like project based. Our bread and butter is remodel and new build, so I don't know what KPIs were to track there as far as per technician or just the business.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's one thing. Another one is that I have this idea, just an idea now, that I would like to. I mean, remodel, new build. That's what we are like. That's what we do. That's my most experience is from. But uh, I'm thinking to build out the service side of the business, like a separate department or even a separate entity, and then on a long term try to sell that. So keep the business, the remodel project, like kind of like supporting the lifestyle. But once we making enough money out of the business, I can maybe use funding from that side of the business to start like a service department, and then build that to sell one day. And also, as I'm thinking, uh, probably I would take out some sort of a credit. And as far as balance sheet, so obviously you have your balance sheet on QuickBooks. What's more of a assets, but as far as I know, in my business, anything below $2,500 like purchases, that's expense. However, we have a ton of like small tools under that price, and technically we can call them assets. From would you recommend to show like a different like balance sheet to the bank, like, hey, this is all my small hand tools, whatever, press guns, a lot of stuff
Yeah,
there
usually,
to make the balance sheet look better, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. Like, do you have a lot of liabilities? Like, do you already have quite a bit of debt?
I have somewhat of a strategic reasons just to build business credit.
Okay.
Most of them are auto loans, business auto loans, um, and some like midterm, like 5-year loans.
Yeah, usually when
Yeah.
I'm doing balance sheet, I'm just really like for the smaller stuff, I'm just gonna bundle it up as miscellaneous tools, and then I'll have
Mm-hmm.
like a list of all the stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
like for us, we have like a lot of like weed whackers, blowers, chainsaws, etc. Like I'm just gonna be like, hey, miscellaneous tools, $8,000. The reason I do it that way is that way if they want to take it on the balance sheet, they will. Otherwise, sometimes I'll be like, those are not depreciable assets. Let's take them off the balance sheet, and then they can do it on
Mm-hmm.
their own. So I usually just keep it separated.
Uh,
Um, but I usually don't list them out individually because then they get like, oh, he's basically trying
oh
to
no,
count every little tiny thing as an asset.
no, no,
So
no, no. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like not like not the last like screwdriver type of thing, but we have a lot of tools in a thousands of dollar range where like I could turn that into cash if needed. Um, Therefore, I'm somewhat of an asset. Okay, that's good to know. Another
basically
question that I
trying to
yeah.
eventually have a recurring side of the business. Right now, it makes up 10% of the business. We know that we want to grow that, eventually probably sell it because it's more of a sellable asset, given that fact that it's recurring. What do you do now, Victor, in terms of recurring? Like, do you do inspections? Are you doing warranties? What is the service side currently?
So it's just word of mouth, organic. Like we have a Google page. We get some calls. I do a very minimal SEO just because with projects our capacity is almost 100%. So the service is basically, I mean, last year was yeah exactly like around 10% of the business, the income. So it's honestly, I had this like debating my with myself that oh maybe I should just because that was around $100,000. So like oh maybe I should just find 250K project or 425K project and dish the service side because it's somewhat of a distraction right now.
Right.
Uh, but at the same time, it's from cash flow perspective, it's super helpful.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and I don't know how what because I heard that oh you have to like somewhat separate the two businesses if you want to sell it, one or the other. I just don't know how that would work. Like, yeah, should I start like a separate company with different name, different branding, and separate employees, or should I just like kind of like just branch it out of with the same business name and branding?
I think the
Um,
evaluation gets a lot better if you actually combine the two, because I think that the two
mhm,
will feed off of each other.
mhm,
One thing that I'm really interested in when it comes to plumbing, and I've seen several people do this, is not only just go after service, but go after your current one-time projects, selling them some sort of a warranty or like an ongoing recurring maintenance model. And so,
mhm,
for example, you do an install, like, hey, here's your price, 50 grand for this project. By the way, we sell this $99 per month. And if you're on that program, everything that we install is warranted forever. If there's a leak, if there's a break, anything happens, we cover it. Um,
mhm.
and that takes a long time to build up. But in the long term, you have this recurring stream of revenue that looks very,
Mhm,
very interesting from a cash flow perspective as well as from an acquisition perspective. Because then if you
mhm,
think of it as like using service as the way to fill in the holes between the projects, you create just a much better business. Now the projects can be the big money maker, but then filling in the where there's gaps between them with service or warranty work, where you warranty your big projects and then you sell them on some sort of subscription. That's very interesting to me.
mhm, mhm. I mean, I just don't know how would because obviously these projects usually uh, go through a general contractor, and I don't know how would that sit with them. I'm sure. I mean, it's definitely there is opportunity there. Just I think one way to do it may be that show the general contractor like, hey, just to maybe win the project, you can show them like we do something like that,
Mhm.
and then from there, yeah, that's actually that's a good idea.
Yeah, like, and even what I've seen some people do is they'll ask the general contractor like, hey, if I get the project, we actually have a warranty, so you're not ever
Mm,
called back for a little leak because like the general contractor doesn't be called for that anyways. So it's like, hey,
yeah.
we will actually be the ones that come back. We will contact the customer directly, make sure we
Mm,
have the warranty set up, etc. And then you get 100 customers. It's only $10,000 a month, but you're probably rarely doing the work required. Like it's very minimal. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason I mentioned that is because that recurring revenue will have a much higher multiple when you go to sell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. But that's so I would not, I mean, as of right now, I would not want to sell like the project side. So how would you separate that as a sale? Like, hey, it's I'm still like spotless
Mhm.
plumbers doing the projects, but you're spotless plumbers doing the service calls. That's what I don't know. Like,
Yeah. So you would never want to sell both of them together?
I mean, right now that's the idea. I mean, later I could change my mind. I mean, that would simplify things for sure.
Hmm.
I mean,
Well,
I love what I do,
yeah.
and that's what I like. Pretty much the only thing what I know how to do. So I don't really see myself to be like
Doing
a
something
real
else.
estate investor or something
Right.
else. So,
Yeah. Yeah, then it might be if you're like for certain you want to keep projects forever, it might be worth it just to keep them separate. But it's
mm,
very easy to grease the wheels between one-time projects and getting them into recurring, or even
mm,
just service upselling into a project or projects downselling into a maintenance, right? So
mm,
it's nicer when the name of the company, like you could call it spotless something else. Like even if you went
mm,
more the handyman route, but you probably don't want to, you're devaluing your service. So it's like you could call it something else, but
mm,
if the brand was the same, it's just easier to sell up and down the value chain.
mm,
Um,
mm. Understood.
you could start it as together, Victor, and then down the road, if you're like, okay, I'm gonna really scale it and break
Mm,
it off and sell it, then flip over. Because until it's doing over 500,000, like the service side, until it's doing that, it's not really sellable anyways. So you could keep it the
mm,
same for the sake of simplicity, and then if it starts to grow, then just break it off, create a new entity with a DBA, and then have it so we could sell it that way.
uh-huh. Yeah. Also, the question kind of like, should I really focus on that right now? Just let it, because as I said, I was like going with the maybe I should just not even take the service calls because a lot of times, honestly, it's just a pain while we have like massive projects to do, like 50 to $100,000 sometimes. So at that time, like, oh, we're like here to like mess with this $500 call, let's say, and like, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, probably it's a me problem as far as like I have to decide what I
Well,
want to do.
mhm. Even if it's just a matter of like you got one person dedicated, it was like, hey, look, your main objective
Mm,
is maintenance. And if there's not maintenance, you're going on a project, but you don't schedule them on the projects. It's just like you can get ahead of on the projects if they're around. That would be the way to
mm,
start the division, right? I think that it's just more a matter of like where do you want the business, what do you want it to look like? Like the only reason we're even
mm,
talking about this right now is the fact that you think you can sell it down the road, right?
yeah.
Because if that's not the like, you want to do projects forever, so it might just be to your point of distraction. We spent all our time and energy just build up the brand, focus on operations or on the project
Mm,
side, and focus on marketing to fill in your gaps because like you can do plumbing
uh-huh,
year round.
yeah. Okay. Um, what else? So bonus structure. Um, Same thing with projects. I don't know if I could do something what you do with like lawn services.
Mhm.
But at the same, I would like to come up with something just to like as an addition to uh, have my employees stick around longer.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you right now most of your projects are they based upon a bid price or an hourly rate?
it's always based, so we like as the cost, unless there are some change orders, that's what it is.
Yeah, so you could do a percentage of, basically the labor goes to the employee.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
right now, when you're building your estimate, what's the per hour rate you're kind of trying to hit?
195.
And then what's the base pay just to get a decent plumber in the door?
30 to $35. I mean, a master
Okay.
could be more like 35 to 40.
Okay. So you're looking around like 17 to 20% of their hourly rate to the customer, quote unquote, the target
Mm-hmm.
rate is what you're paying them out. So you could just be like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, you guys are gonna get 20% of everything you earn for the business. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this assumes that they're pretty efficient, but because you're doing big projects, there's not a lot of downtime. But what this was incentivized, the part that this helps, Victor, like when it comes to big projects where you're on a job site for a couple weeks, is lunchtimes, breaks, smoke breaks, getting to the job site on time. Like that's what you're actually cutting down on because the actual work itself,
Mm-hmm.
usually they're going to be efficient or they're not. Like they're either going to work hard or not on these bigger projects. But I've seen some like electricians inside P4P doing the same thing, and they're on like that 15 to 20% on P4P that they give the employee, and you just cut. They just saw so much. Like, okay, we'll do a shorter break time. No, like let's not do smoke breaks. Let's like everyone kept each other accountable to be on the job site as long as possible because it's affecting everyone's paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Uh, Another question is, how much cash would you recommend to keep on your like checking accounts to just based on should be that based on like revenue? So let's say it's $1 million business. What's your like, okay, that should be like
Yeah,
minimum.
a lot of it depends on your risk tolerance. Like for me,
Mm-hmm.
I want at least 1 month of revenue in the bank, just for working
Mm-hmm.
capital, making sure we're good. Some people will say 2 months worth of expenses. No one knows what their expenses are, so I just use 1 month of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing 80,000 a month in revenue, like there should be at least 80 grand in the bank, mostly just so you can cover payroll. If something crazy happens with their processor for a couple weeks, you're usually good
Mm-hmm.
in terms of payments. Or a contractor, a job goes bad. The bigger your projects, the more money you need in working capital, though. And so if you're doing a $50 to $100,000 project, you might want a little bit more just in case one
Mm-hmm.
project goes bad, you don't want that to put you in a bad spot.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay.
The
Uh,
challenging part for you as a sub is the cash flow because like
yeah, I
they usually are
was,
coming to you with the terms, right? That's the challenging part.
yeah, I mean, right now, and that's one of my questions too, that most of my GCs usually like a few weeks to a month to get paid. It's like a progress payment. However, to be able to grow now, we are like getting into commercial jobs,
Hmm.
and cash flow could be. We were lucky to find a couple like net 30, which is not that bad. But
Yeah.
I know that we'll end up meeting with contractors net 60, net 90, or even more. And I got like a decent amount of line of credit
Hmm.
to use, although I don't really have like a strategy. I mean, I have somewhat of a, obviously we buy the material through suppliers who give us like a certain amount of credit, usually net 25, and then I can bump that balance to a credit card, and then once that credit card due, then I can even toss it, pay it off with a line of credit. I just don't know if that's like a right strategy or is there is anything better to do besides using your own cash, which because last year I pretty much used cash only for everything and drained quite a bit.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's just I don't it's not a good feeling when the cash balance is just going down, down, down. And yeah, I know it's coming in sometime, but you never know what can happen. And
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out a strategy to use my credit line
Hmm.
in a responsible way.
Yeah. Yeah, like the challenging part if you're using a line of credit, especially right now when interest rates are above 10%, like
Mm,
financing becomes a real cost to the business. If you every single job you're having to tap into it, even if it's for a few weeks. And so like what you could potentially do is just simply offer pricing different to the general contractor based upon their pricing terms. Like, hey,
mm,
if you give me an extra 25% before the job, here's your price. And then basically it's up to them to figure out their cash flow needs. And I wouldn't be giving the discount. I'd be putting on top of if they go longer. Um, and so just to bake in the discount for them if they pay better, because you do not want to be in the treadmill of using credit cards and lines of credit just especially pay off COGS like materials
mm,
and direct labor. It's a spiral. Like I would increase my cash on hand and I'd rather take that because like if you're paying the bank 12-15% on a line of credit, like it's just gonna be very difficult to make margin if you're having to carry every single job for 2 or 3 weeks.
mm, mm. Okay. All right. Our question, inventory. So that's where our last year could have been more profitable if I don't uh, get like a pretty serious amount of inventory. Uh, do you keep inventory at all in your businesses, or what's the way you guys track it? Because right now, I'm estimating I have around like $50,000 just sitting in our warehouse, which pretty kind of hurt our net profit quite a bit. Obviously, it's there. I'm not able to return it or anything.
Hmm.
I'm trying to come up with a way to track it, or does it even worth to track it? Rather, just like, hey, this is what we have. Try to just pull it out from the warehouse as quickly as possible and just forget about it. So,
Yeah, the challenging part is you're depending on inherent knowledge from your team to know what the inventory is. And so there's a very high likelihood there are things in your shop that they are buying every day or every once in a while, but because they simply
mm,
just don't even know it's there. And so I would, I hate inventory, especially inventory that goes over 30 days. Like if I have to hold something for more than 30 days, I usually just want to get
mm,
rid of it because the storage alone, you're paying for the rent, you're paying for that warehouse facility. Um, and so one thing I did with another plumbing company or handyman and plumbing company last year was like, we're going to take everything that's inventory and anything that's more than 90 days been sitting here, you're going to get rid of it. Like you're just going to sell it, get rid of it. And they
mm,
literally half their warehouse that they're spending $4,000 a month on. Half of it was literally just stuff that's been sitting there for literally years. And so
mm,
if that's the case, I'd just be trying to get rid of stuff, like flash
mm,
sale the thing. Otherwise, if it's going to be used, like if it's a material or a product that can be used in the future, then it has to be inventoried. Like we got to know
mm,
where it's at, what's it doing, whether it be QR codes are really easy, um,
mm,
or putting it in some sort of basic inventory management system so that people know where stuff is. And then it's like, how granular do you get? Because you can get very, very fine with like screws and very small things and be like, hey, you took 5 screws, you took 8 and that those are usually the best businesses I've seen. Like when they are really managing that level of granularity, they have things dialed in.
okay. Overhead. So same, similar question to the cash in our account. Like, what is like the percentage what you would think consider healthy per to compared to your top line revenue?
It really depends on the growth, right? So you grew a lot like in 2023, what was your revenue?
6, 7,
Yeah, so like
six,
you
seven,
grew
seven.
by more than 50% last year. And so any business that's over 50% growth year over year is in mass amounts of growth
Mm,
mode and it sucks cash. And so I
mm,
really don't usually judge someone's net profit unless they take a year where they grow less than 25%. Because
mm,
even if you grew 25% this coming year, you'd probably have to have a truck. You probably have to have one more employee. You probably have to get a little more shop space. Like there'd be so much more overhead expenses. And so,
mm,
to draw 10 to 12% when you grew by 50% year over year is not horrible. I believe that if you're
mm,
like, hey, we're not going to buy more trucks, we're not going to hire more people, we're not going to get any more equipment, we're not going to get any more inventory, but we're just going to raise our prices as we get more jobs coming
mm,
in, I think this year you'd probably be more like 20 to 25% profit. And that's
mm,
good. And so
mm,
I always take like your growth rate into account when it comes to determining whether or not it's a good net profit. A good net profit, 10 to 12%, not by itself, but the fact that you also grew the business by 50% and you got two more
mm,
employees and you probably got an office person at that same time, not horrible.
mm. Okay. Okay.
The question just
Um,
becomes the question becomes how big do you want the business to be? Like if you're trying to build a $5 million business, it's going to take a lot more assets, a lot more trucks, more shop space, etc. And if you can maintain 10 to 12% profit throughout that entire time, that's not bad. You're building the
mhm.
asset in that case. But if you're like, hey, I'm not going to grow, now I start taking cash out of the business. That's when I think at your size you'd be probably making 20% margin.
Having a hard, I mean, in the past like 6 months or so, I was like, I would say 70% on, I mean, out of the field. But I have this, so our projects are relatively complicated. It takes a lot of experience, takes a lot of effort to get things done, and a lot of variables. And I have decent employees, decent guys who I trust, but I feel like since the projects are growing, they may need more help on the field. So I cannot just expect them to figure it out. So I'm like, should I stay out of the field or should I just have dedicated days? Hey, Monday, Tuesday, I'm out. Don't even like think that I will come help. That's you've got to figure it out. And then have like another 2 or 3 days of okay, this is field work, focus on that. Um, but at the same time, I'm still doing the sales, doing all that part. So I don't know like how does it make sense to balance it or rather just let's say, okay, for the next 3 to 6 months now, we're just operations, figure it out, systems, SOPs, all the good stuff. And then if everything is dialed in, hey, I might be able to get back to the field and have a admin or someone handle all that.
Whether or not you're working in the field really comes down to how many employees you have. And when you have that many direct reports, like we're talking 5 people out in the field,
Mm,
it almost becomes a full-time job of just managing them. And so when it comes to your time, it's like if you can just spend your time making those guys 10% more efficient. So like the inventory, for example, that's a high
mm,
leverage task that if dialed in probably makes them 5 to 10% more efficient. But now you extrapolate that, of course, 5 different plumbers. And so now you're
mm,
looking at a 25% increase because there's 5 of them. And so working in the field is probably the lowest leverage thing you can do in the business, especially when you're paying
mm,
people $40 an hour. And so I would really think about, okay, when do I get pulled into the field? And I'd be documenting that. And if, for example, is it during inspections? Is it finalizing the last bit of a work? Is it a complex part of the job? Or is it 10 to 20% of the services that we offer that we could just nix? And it gives me 80% of my time back because they're just very, very complicated services. Um, or do I systematize a certain aspect of this so that my admin person can do it for me? Or you go hire like basically a head of operations. Right. And so like
mm.
this really comes down to how big of a business do you want to build? Like, are you wanting to keep it around 1 million? Are you trying to get to three? Like, what's kind of your longer term goal?
I mean, for this year, we're trying to be anywhere 1.2 to 1.6. Uh, and yeah, like that's a 3 to 5 year mark. I want to be the business around the 5 million. Uh,
Like at that
that's like,
size, you're gonna have to get ahead of operations, right?
mm,
So it might not be a bad idea to go get someone that you're gonna pay them 40 or $45 an hour, but they're the person that everyone contacts. And they spend maybe
uh,
70, 80% of their time out in the field working, and the other 20 to 30% just doing what currently you're getting called in to do.
uh-huh,
Now that would be a very pro growth move. Getting someone very expensive, they would be basically head of operations. Then you have admin, you'd have operations from this person, and then your responsibility would be sales. And that's when the business
mm,
will go to the next level, is when you spend all your time on sales, not admin and not operations.
mm,
And so like the
mm,
unlock to go from 1 million to three is you focusing on sales and getting someone out in operations that can do all of the fill-in work. And it's very highly skilled work. So it's not like with lawn care, like we just systemize and simplify everything down to like basics so we can get entry-level people and we don't need quality control. But for you, like you're gonna have to have somebody sign off on things, someone do that like when there's a difficult project. It's all very custom. And so I would be pushing it like if you're trying to get 5, you gotta get ahead of operations. The difference between taking 5 to 10 years to get to 5 million and doing it in 3 or 4 is simply a function of do you get a great head of
mm,
operations?
mm, mm. Okay. Still conflicted with that one. I mean, I understand that at some point I gotta hand it off.
Hmm.
It's just even with hires, first of all, it's hard to find decent and qualified technicians, uh, and also like to show them how good looks like in our business.
Right.
I don't, as of right now, I don't think I have enough technicians to just like handle, let's say, a new hire who we should dial it in like in the 2 to 4 weeks to at least, hey, do you want to do our way, or is that
Right.
something which you want to follow or look elsewhere? So that sounds like I'm still like in this, should I just do hybrid or just bite the bullet? And yeah, it might be a 3 to 6 month struggle. I don't know, because at the same time, all of our partners and contractors, you screw them 1 or 2 times and probably you're out.
Yeah.
So,
And you can do kind of a hybrid to it, Victor, as well. It's like, hey guys, instead of calling me out to job sites, you're gonna first video call me. And like
mm,
these are my hours. Like these are when I'm working. There are 2 hours every day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. During
mm,
these times, you give me a video call because
mm,
now you can do without spending an hour driving to and from the job site. You can do something, fix their issue or resolve the issue within 3, 4 minutes.
mm, mm,
So that's going to be the more cash friendly thing to do because you're right. Like if you get ahead of operations, you must get to 1.6 next year. Like you have to grow because like their overhead expense is going to be substantial. Like they'll eat up
mm,
10% profit right now. And so
mm,
I think like the hybrid would be like, how do you create systems in the business currently to keep doing what you're doing, but make it more scalable? And so if it's, hey guys, between 9 and 10 a.m. and between 2 and 3 p.m., those are the times you can contact me. and to do inspections, walkthroughs, whatever you need. If you have a problem, and you're going to video call me, I'm not going to show up to the job site because that's what's killing you in terms of taking you away from your
Mm-hmm.
current job site. That's gonna be the most cash friendly thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's just like this question just came up in my mind because we're in Colorado, so a lot of mountain area services, the phone service is not always that great. Have you ever had to deal with something like that? I was thinking get like a was
Starlink.
like Elon Starlink,
Yeah.
although it's I cannot just like hand off like a Starlink for each employee, but I don't know if because sometimes that's like difficult. Like, hey, let's FaceTime, but it's just like no signal.
Yep. But then
Yeah.
something that you bake into the job pricing. It's like, hey, when you're at the
Mm,
job site and you're doing a job bid, it's like, oh, this is a
mm,
job I'm gonna have to show up in person because they literally won't be able to contact me. Okay, well,
mm,
I'm baking an extra 4 to 5 hours of
mm.
my time driving to and from that job.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. Okay. Uh, Another question, warehouse space. Right now we have a smallish, like a 1,300 square feet warehouse. One reason is the inventory is getting tight, but the other reason is just we have a lot of stuff. And right now, just started to negotiate a 3 to 5 year lease. I haven't decided yet. Uh, the catch is that the place is like 2,200 square feet, so almost double, but it's warehouse only, so no office space, no bathrooms, nothing. And what I'm trying to negotiate that obviously is per square footage rate is cheaper this way. And hey, if I finish like at an office, at a bathroom, I mean, we could do it relatively cheap just because we have the expertise and the connections to do such a project. Um, what would be like a reasonable? Right now, what I was thinking, like, hey, give me the same rate for two. I'll sign 5. Give me the same rate for 2 years. What's current rate is. If I finish your warehouse to like a flex space, therefore increasing value, for the rest of the lease, we keep the same rate. Do you think that's a reasonable offer or?
Yeah, like it just comes down to whether that landlord even wants that or can get it permitted correctly too,
Mm,
right? Sometimes for
yeah.
warehouses, they might not be allowed to have any sort of water or sewer
Mm,
coming up through the bottom. So it'd be mostly around permitting, I would imagine, but
mm,
and whether or not the landlord wants to deal with that in the future. Because like a landlord that does manufacturing or warehouse, sometimes they're like, I don't want to deal with toilets, I don't want to deal with any water, and so I'll just get low maintenance, basically storage. And so that
mm.
might be what you adding in a bathroom in an office just complicates it for them. So it just kind of comes down to what they want.
I mean, they have, I think, 80% of their spaces are offices. So every utilities are in, so we're not doing it from scratch. But I just wanted to kind of negotiate because I would not sign a 5 year lease unless I know my
Yeah.
monthly rent is pretty predictable.
Yep.
Because this way, I would pay the same what I pay right now for the smaller warehouse. Just no office, no bathroom for I don't know, a year or two,
Right.
which is fine. We prefer because my goal is to turn that warehouse into somewhat of like a training space, like uh, build out like examples, like hey, this is how it's done. If you have
Yep.
questions, you can hang out here for an hour and just check it out. And then if you still have questions, then you can talk. We can talk
Yeah.
about it.
Have you ever been to Tommy Mello's shop?
No.
No, I highly recommend it. He does it for free for anyone in home services, but he has
Hmm.
exactly what you just talked about in terms of the training facility built out for garage doors.
Hmm.
And like that sort of space is exactly what I think what you would be great for the plumbing, especially because your constraint is quality control and highly skilled people. And so being able to
Hmm.
show them this is how what good looks like, this is how to do it. Training facilities start to make a lot of sense when you have that higher level
Hmm.
laborer. Because it's worth the cost of investment due to the fact that they're expensive labor, as well as the cost of doing the work incorrectly is huge. And so
Hmm.
I would recommend it if you can get like a shop tour with him. It's free, I think. Um, I'd recommend it.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Well, look it up. I mean, I follow him, and I think I'm in even their group on Facebook, but uh, never heard about this though. Uh, just circling back to selling the business, what are the current like multipliers, or what's like how can you value your business just like based on, you know, look at the balance sheet, or is it like a multiplier with the net profit or?
Yeah, usually you're gonna have some sort of multiple on the net profit plus, whatever assets you have. The thing is,
Mm,
that multiplier ranges dramatically, right? And so having recurring revenue is gonna increase it. Having just a bigger business, especially in plumbing, like if you get over 1 million, you actually start to like someone wants to buy you. If you get over for 5 million, it becomes like where every dollar of revenue and profit has a higher multiple on it. So you might get
mm,
a 1 or 2x multiple plus asset value if you're under 1 million. You likely get a 2 to 3 if you get over 1 million. But if you get a 5, it's very likely you get a 3 or 4 or even more multiplier on your profit plus your assets. So it just becomes a matter
mhm.
of like every dollar the business gets bigger, you're just attracting bigger buyers. Because like a buyer of $1 million business is likely someone that wants to like switch industries or just like a local competitor that wants to roll you up into theirs. But if you start getting to 5 million, someone with private equity or a regional player starts to get interested in you and actually move the needle. One thing I was going to say too is if you do some form of pay for performance, I actually think this will almost vicariously fix the issue
Mhm,
of them calling you out to the job site. Because if you say, "Hey, I'm only available these 2 hours a day, and I want you to video call me," or let's even just say you're still going to go to their job site because the issues with the cell service, if they have to wait for you for an hour, right now, they think that's great because they're going to sit around and do nothing. And you're
mhm,
stressed out of your mind to get there. Whereas when they're on pay for performance, they will figure it out or they'll make sure it happens so that they don't have to sit around and wait for you. And you don't become the bottleneck. So I guarantee you, like if you do pay for performance in some way, you will suddenly not have to show up at the job site half as much because no longer do they
yeah.
look at you coming out the job site as basically a way to take a break for an hour. It will be like, hey,
Mhm,
let's figure this out on the phone. Let's video call this. Let's just figure this out ourselves without having to pull you into it. And so many times we've seen the amount of like admin or quality control to laborers get halved once you pay for performance comes into play because the crew wants to stay busy. They want to keep working and they're not looking for ways to simply create random admin or check-ins or like questions that they could really just
mhm,
figure out themselves.
mhm. Okay. Okay. All right. I don't think we talked about much about the KPIs, like what's worth to track,
Mhm.
uh, at
One of
my
the big
side. Yeah.
Yeah, like when you're creating the estimates, are you creating like a number of budgeted hours and you multiply that by the 195? Is that kind of how you're doing it on the back end of the bid?
Yes.
So I would really be tracking like the budget hours versus, how long it actually takes. So basically, did the job go well? That's how we're going to track that.
Mhm,
But more importantly, I'd be tracking your labor efficiency. So how many budget hours were completed to how many clocked hours. That's the number
mhm,
that will get dramatically impacted by pay for performance. Because right now, they're like if the job is 100 hours that you have on the job, they're not clocking 100 hours. They're likely clocking 120, 130, or 140. And so knowing what that number is, and I would imagine it's around 60 to 70% your efficiency score, which is budget hours divided by clocked hours. Knowing what that number is, and then I would incentivize people based on it, whether it be pay for performance like strictly, or just telling guys, hey,
mhm,
I measure these two numbers and their efficiency score of just budget hours completed divided by the clocked hours. The higher this number, the more money you make. Like that
mhm,
alone, without even to go into like P for P strictly, would would really change the business
mhm,
because there's so much wasted time on job sites, and they're not incentivized to push each other to be more efficient. And so I would even put like bounties on jobs. One like easy way to do P for P is just to be like, hey, here's the budget hours. If you beat that, you make more money. Like,
mhm.
and then it's basically up to them to make sure it's done to spec. But
Uh-huh.
that's like an easy way to do P for P instead of having to measure like okay budget hours and clocking in the job and all the other aspects of like really refining it. Just simply say, hey, these are budget hours based on how many hours you clock. If you beat that, you'll make more money.
Mhm. Okay. Any other KPIs maybe what I should?
And one thing I would be tracking is the percentage of your revenue that you're spending on admin and
Mhm,
non-revenue producing employees. And so right now
mhm,
you produce enough labor to probably cover your own wage. But as the business grows, it's like what percentage of our revenue is going to the office person, a salesperson, a quality control person, an inspector. Like as you get to that $5 million marker, tracking that, because what I see
Mhm.
a lot of times, you see big bloat in that area. All of a sudden, you have a salesperson for every field technician. You have an admin person for every field technician. It makes no sense. And so, trying to keep
Mhm.
that number like to a 5 to 1, it's like 5 people in the field to one non-revenue producing employee, and that's kind of why you're hitting up against it now. You hit that 5 marker, and you're kind of like in between both of those positions. But if once you get say 10 employees, you don't want to have 4 people in the office. It should be like
Yeah.
maybe two, right? So I would just
Mhm.
be tracking that because like I see the two biggest issues with almost all home service businesses is like either a inefficient labor, so the direct costs are out of whack, or their indirect costs, i.e., admin and sales and like SG&A. That's what gets out of whack. And in most times, it's just
Mhm.
because they hire too many admin, too many salespeople compared to how much is actually producing the revenue. So.
Mhm. Okay. And another one is sales. So currently, the GCs and other partners we work with, most of them word of mouth or some sort of like a social media, but not like a direct like uh, marketing strategy. And the commercial side, honestly, it's not that hard because a lot of those contractors just post the jobs and you can just bid it, although it's more competitive. On the residential side, though, earlier last year I tried like an email reach out, but honestly, there was not a. Yeah, there's this Alex Hormozy quoted like you got to do at least 100, but I don't even know if there are like 200 or 500 plus uh, general contractors out here who I can reach out. So I could easily like just knock that out. But let's say I reached out to probably around the 50 to 75 of them and just crickets. Uh, Recently I tried phone call, but same thing. It's usually you get an office person and then you just depending on then if they reach they hand it to the owner or whoever is responsible to reach out. And I mean, I know the third option is go out and just, go to their office. Although I don't know, I'm more of like an introverted person. So I just don't like, hey, here's some donuts, whatever. Like, let's just like kind of cringe, let's say.
Yeah.
So I don't know what would be like a good, like, hey, let's do email and then a phone call. And then if they are serious, then maybe set up a meeting. So I don't know how to build a strategy around that.
Yeah, I would do a couple things. I think the big thing is general contractors don't need you because they probably have a plumber already until that plumber messes up or that plumber drops out. And so
Yeah.
really who gets rewarded usually in these B2B relationships is who's consistent. So you just need to stay top of mind. So if you're going to do email, you email them twice a month, right? And it's going to be
Mhm.
your before and after photo. It's going to be total like a general contractor like nerds over seeing before and after, but seeing the cost. Like here's how much it cost us. Like here's who was the price of the job. Um, that's the sort of thing that will stop them from, actually opening up and like seeing the email and like, oh, that's kind of cool. All right, next. Well, they see that 10 times and then all of a sudden their plumber drops out on them. They're going to call you. And then it's also a matter of
Mhm.
like, well, why would they choose you over anyone else? And then it's like, well, what's their pain point? Their pain point is they don't want to come fix your work because they're co-signing on your work. So that's why like I really like the idea of doing like, hey, we warranty all of our work lifetime, and you will never have to like fix a leaky toilet. Whatever. We go to the customer and we will get a warranty set up and you will never have to deal with it. So that's like one aspect, like how do you actually be fundamentally different and solve their problems and their pain points? But then also from like just a marketing perspective, it's the consistency that B2B, that this game is played on. Because either A, they just know you because you've been around for 100 years, but the only other way to like get their foot in the door is their current contractor drops out. Like something bad happens. And you just need to be top of mind at that moment. Like, oh, yeah, that Victor guy, he keeps sending me things every couple months, looking really good. The projects look clean, looks like organized. The pricing looks decent. I'm gonna just call him up and go.
Mhm.
So I would just say
Okay.
consistent with it. So like I would put them when you have less than 100 hit list, like your hit list is less than 100, your prospects are less than 100. You just want to like you want to know every single one of them. You want to be the person that you're sending them a card at Christmas. You're sending something at Thanksgiving. Like it does because your marketing budget, even if you spent 10, $15,000 a year, that's a couple $100 per prospect. So you can give them a gift, you
Mhm.
can send them a card, you can send them every twice a month. You're sending them an email, the before and after of your projects and what the price was. and just like keeping you top of mind, that's how you kind of get your foot in the door with those relationships I've seen work well.
Hmm. Okay. That's actually a great idea.
And then
So
you
it's
don't
kind
have
of
to
like
you don't have to make cookies and donuts, you know?
rather not.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Also need the recording, Victor, but as time goes on, if you have any follow-up, just email me back the email that I
Hmm.
send you the recording. Especially
Okay.
once you get to kind of because you're gonna keep growing. It's like you're gonna hit this breaking point around that operation side. Either do I hire
Hmm.
that operations manager or head of ops, or do I try to systematize things? And I think from a cash flow perspective, that's the safer route right now. Is like creating better systems around you getting to the job sites. And if you simply made it where you had 2 hours a day that you were open for them to contact you, and then you implemented some sort of of compensation based on their efficiency score, whether it be actually
Hmm.
P for P or just simply, hey, we're tracking budget hours and clocked hours. I think those two things would be like my biggest takeaways. So that as you continue to grow, you're profitable and can get the margin up a little higher.
All right. Sounds good.
Awesome, brother. Well, you have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Take care. You
Bye.
got it. Bye bye.